I still remember the first time I noticed him. It was late spring, the kind of day when the air feels heavy but not yet suffocating, and the grass in the cemetery was bright and freshly cut. I had gone there out of habit. I like quiet places, and that graveyard had always been one of those odd spots where silence felt thicker, almost protective. Some people find cemeteries eerie. I found them calm. Until him. He was sitting on a folding chair, parked right at the foot of a single grave. The stone wasn't particularly large, just a simple marker with a woman's name etched into it. I don't even want to share her name here. It feels too personal, but I remember thinking how ordinary it looked. No angel carved on top, no dramatic epitaph. Just a name, two dates, and a dash in between. He had with him a folded newspaper, a paperback book, a brown paper bag lunch, and this detail stuck with me, a small portable radio. The kind you don't see much anymore, with a plastic antenna and a faint crackle whenever he twisted the dial. He wasn't doing anything unusual. He just sat, unfolded the paper, read for a while, occasionally looked up at the stone, then went back to reading. I thought, that's kind of sweet. The next day, I came back and there he was again. Same chair, same bag, same quiet routine. He even laid down a towel big and striped like the kind you'd take to the beach and stretched out over the grave. At first, I thought he was just sitting near it, but no, he lay fully across the stone, his cheek pressed against the earth as if listening for something beneath. That image unsettled me. Still does, but day after day, I saw him. I didn't know his name, didn't know anything about him except his devotion. He was older, maybe in his late 50s or 60s, with a slouch that made him seem smaller than he probably was in his youth. His hair was thinning, mostly gray, and he wore plain button-up shirts, tucked in, sleeves rolled. Every day at noon, without fail, he arrived. I started timing my visits around him, almost like I wanted to check if he was real. He'd set down the chair, open his lunch, an apple, maybe a sandwich, then tune his little radio. Sometimes classical music, sometimes baseball. Always low, as if he didn't want to disturb her. And then he'd nap, right there on her grave, arms crossed, face soft, like a man finally at peace. At first, I thought it was beautiful, heartbreaking, but beautiful. I mean, who does that anymore? Who shows up every single day to talk to their dead? Most of us leave flowers once a year and try to forget, but not him. He was loyal in a way that almost felt holy. But the longer I watched, the more it twisted inside me. Because one afternoon, when the shadows were long and the cicadas screamed, I noticed something strange. He was lying there as usual, eyes closed, but his lips were moving. I crept a little close enough to catch the sound and realized he was whispering, not to himself, to her. His tone wasn't calm though, or it was urgent, like begging. I couldn't make out the words, but it chilled me. It wasn't grief. It was desperation. After that, I kept my distance. Still curious, still watching, but no longer admiring. His devotion had turned into something else. About a month went by, rain or shine, there he was. The towel, the radio, the chair, the whispers. I began to feel like the cemetery wasn't mine anymore, like I was intruding on some private ritual. Then came the day everything ended. It was late afternoon, sky turning the color of bruises before a storm. I saw him walking in, slower than usual, carrying his chair under one arm and a heavy coat draped over the other. The coat seemed odd, it was too warm for it, but I didn't think much of it at the time. I left early that day, something in me restless, stomach knotted for no reason I could explain. I shouldn't have gone, but habit is hard to break. The next morning, the cemetery was crawling with police. Yellow tape fluttered in the wind, plastic against stone. People were whispering, pointing. And there he was, or what was left of him. They said he'd taken a gun, pressed it to his chest, and ended his life right there on her grave. No hesitation. A single act, as deliberate as all the days he had spent preparing for it. He had been building to that moment, and I stupidly, naively had watched without seeing. The official story was simple enough. Grief-stricken husband couldn't live without his wife. Tragic. Sad, but clean. But I can't shake what I saw in those last weeks. The whispers. The way his body seemed to sink lower into the ground every time he lay across it, as if the earth was pulling him down. The desperation in his face. And here's the part I've never told anyone because no one would believe me. After he was gone, I avoided the cemetery for a while, but eventually curiosity pulled me back. His grave had been added next to hers, 2 stones side by side, perfectly ordinary. But one day at noon, I swear I saw the towel again. Not brand new. The same faded stripes, spread across her grave. No chair, no radio. Just the towel, perfectly flat on the grass, though no one was around. I stood frozen, staring, waiting for someone to appear. No one did. I finally forced myself to walk closer, heart hammering. And when I bent down, I could swear the ground was warm. Not sun warm, body warm. I staggered back, nearly tripped over a headstone. Left in a hurry, didn't look back. But that night, when I tried to sleep, I heard something faint in my head. Like a whisper, not words. Just the sound of lips moving. I never went back to that cemetery again. People call his death a final act of devotion, a love story, and maybe that's what it was. But I can't shake the feeling that devotion is only half the truth, because whatever he whispered into the ground, I think it whispered back. And I think, in the end, he listened. I've worked nights as a nurse for years. Different facilities, different layouts, different teams. But there's one building I cover every now and then that feels different, old, heavy, like the walls have been listening for a century and still haven't gotten tired of it. You know how some hospitals or care homes feel bright and bustling even at 3 a.m.? This isn't one of those. This building is all creaking floors, humming pipes, and shadows that stretch too far under the fluorescent lights. No matter how much cleaning or remodeling they do, the place always smells faintly of antiseptic and old wood. I've never been able to shake the feeling that it is holding on to its past. Other nurses on the night shift will nap on their breaks. They'll find an empty lounge, dim the lights, and catch 20 minutes of sleep. Not me, not here. I won't even close my eyes. There's something about this place that makes my skin crawl when it gets quiet. It's not one single thing. It's the small things piling up. The shadows you catch moving across a hall when nobody's there. Doors that swing shut softly, like someone passed through. Call lights flickering in empty rooms, the buzz sharp and sudden in the stillness. It's the way the old elevator groans even when it hasn't been summoned. Little details, but all together they make you feel watched. There's one room in particular that always makes my stomach drop. You know how some spots just feel off before you even know why? That's this room. A few months back, we had a patient code in there. It was bad, messy, chaotic. We tried everything, compressions, medications, the whole protocol, but the patient slipped away under our hands. When it was over, the room looked like a storm had passed through it. Ever since then, I've hated walking by at night. My hair rises every single time, like static. The air feels colder in front of that door, heavier, as if the space itself is holding its breath. Sometimes the hallway light outside flickers when I approach. Not every night, but often enough to notice. It's the kind of flicker that makes your heart beat a little faster, even though you tell yourself it's just old wiring. Then came the night I won't forget. It was a couple of shifts after the patient had passed. We were restocking supplies in the hallway, chatting quietly, the usual end-of-night routine. One of my coworkers was bent down by the cart. I remember she was laughing at something. Then, out of nowhere, a heavy plastic container from the top shelf, one of those industrial bins that never moves, launched itself off. Not tipped, not nudged. It came down with force, smacking the floor right next to her and scattering supplies. We both jumped back. She screamed, not from the near miss, but from pure shock. Her eyes went wide and she blurted, "It's her." Her, she meant the patient, the one we'd lost in that room. I wanted to tell her not to be ridiculous, that bins don't hurl themselves at people, that gravity and old shelving explain everything, but my mouth stayed shut. Because even as my brain searched for a rational answer, My body felt that same gut-deep fear I'd had outside the room. My skin prickled. The hallway seemed dimmer than it had a moment ago. And for just a second, it felt like someone else was standing there with us. We picked everything up and went back to our work, but the mood was shot. Nobody cracked jokes after that. The halls felt too long, the corners too sharp, and the whole time my coworker kept glancing toward that room like she was expecting to see someone step out. I still work there occasionally, and I still refuse to close my eyes on my breaks. Every time I pass that room, the hairs on my arms rise. Sometimes the light flickers again, like it's blinking at me. Sometimes I hear a faint shuffle inside, even though it's empty. And sometimes nothing happens at all. No flicker, no sound, just a heavy silence that feels worse than noise. People ask me why I keep picking up shifts there if it bothers me so much. I don't have a neat answer. Part of it is routine. Part of it is needing the extra hours. But a small part of me also wants to keep going back, as if returning to that hallway proves to myself that I'm not scared, that I can handle it. But here's the truth. I'm scared. Not of ghosts exactly, but of the idea that some things linger. Grief, trauma, energy, call it what you want. You can clean a room, paint the walls, change the furniture, but you can't always scrub out what happened there. Sometimes the air itself remembers. That's what I feel in that building. Memory, not just mine. Something older, deeper. And on those nights when the hallway goes cold, the light flickers and the shadows seem to move just a little too slowly, I wonder if the patient we lost is still there. Watching us. Waiting. Maybe that container fell because of bad shelving. Maybe my coworker's reaction was just stress. But even now, months later, when I'm standing in that hallway alone at 3 a.m., I swear I can feel eyes on my back. So no, I don't nap there. I don't shut my eyes. Because the oldest building I work at doesn't sleep. And I'm not sure it ever will. It was one of those nights where the air feels heavier than it should. Not storm heavy, not humid heavy, just heavy. I didn't really notice it at first. I was too busy replaying the moment my so-called friend kicked me out of their house. "You've overstayed your welcome," they'd said, which stung more than I expected. I wasn't planning on crashing on their couch forever. Just a night or two. So there I was, walking home way past midnight, my hands stuffed in my jacket pockets, trying to keep the chill out and my pride intact. The streets were dead quiet. Streetlights buzzed faintly, casting that weird yellow glow that never really lights anything properly. My shoes crunched on bits of gravel scattered across the sidewalk, each step sounding way too loud in the silence. That's when I heard it. A sound that didn't fit. At first, I thought it was the wind twisting through the trees. Then it sharpened, cutting through the air like a blade. It was a cat. At least it sounded like a cat. But not the kind of lazy meow you hear outside your window at night. This was raw, drawn out, jagged around the edges. Like pain, a huge amount of pain. I froze. My body reacted before my brain did, stiff and alert, like a deer caught in headlights. The sound was coming from across the street, from inside the graveyard. Now, here's the thing about me. I can ignore a lot of stuff, people fighting. Not my problem. Sirens in the distance, someone else's mess. But an animal in pain? No chance. I can't shut that off. I stood on the edge of the sidewalk, staring at the tall iron fence that wrapped around the cemetery. The place had been there for over a century, its entrance marked by stone pillars that leaned a little too much to the left. The gate was chained shut at night, but the fence was climbable. Not easy, but doable. The crying sound dragged on, pulling at me like a hook in my chest. Against my better judgment, because, honestly, what good story ever starts with, "I hopped into a graveyard at midnight"? I grabbed hold of the cold iron bars, hauled myself up, and swung a leg over. My jacket caught on the top spike for a second, and I panicked, imagining ripping it wide open. But I slipped free and dropped down with a muted thud on the other side. The graveyard smelled like wet leaves and old stone. My sneakers sank slightly into the damp ground as I started walking. Rows of headstones stretched out in every direction, their shapes distorted in the low light. Some stood straight, sharp as teeth, while others leaned like they were tired of holding themselves up. The crying echoed again, deeper inside. I moved carefully, weaving between graves, my breath fogging in front of me. Each step seemed louder than the last, crunching twigs, squishing into soft dirt. My heart had already picked up a rhythm of its own fast, shallow, uncertain. Then, halfway down the main path, the sound stopped, just like that. Cut off mid-cry. The silence that followed was worse than the sound itself. It pressed in, thick and suffocating, making the hairs on my arms stand up. I turned my head slowly, scanning the graves, the trees that bent over the path, the shifting shadows. That's when I saw him. A man. He stepped out from behind a tomb maybe 50 feet away. Big, square stone thing with a cross carved on top. He wore a dark hoodie with the hood pulled low, covering most of his face. He didn't move fast, just stepped out, like he'd been waiting for me. We stood there, frozen in a staring contest neither of us asked for. My chest tightened, like I'd forgotten how to breathe. And then, God, I swear I'll never forget this, he opened his mouth and made a cat noise. Not just any noise, the same noise I'd been following. The same broken, painful cry. It came out of him. My breath caught in my throat, escaping as a sharp gasp. The sound carried, and the man's head jerked slightly, like he'd just been given permission. His posture changed, low forward, deliberate. And then he ran at me, not a jog, not a stumble. Full tilt. Every nerve in my body fired at once. I spun around and bolted, my legs pumping harder than they ever had before. The ground blurred beneath me as I tore down the path, dodging headstones, crashing through weeds. My lungs burned, pulling in air too fast. My ears filled with the rush of blood and the pounding of my shoes. I didn't look back. Not yet. Couldn't risk losing a second. It felt like forever, but maybe 30 seconds in, I couldn't help it. I risked a glance over my shoulder. And what I saw didn't make sense. The man had stopped. Just stopped. He wasn't running anymore. He stood in the middle of the path, hood still shadowing his face. Then, without a word, without a sound, he turned and walked back toward the tomb. Calm, slow, like he hadn't just tried to chase me down. My stomach flipped. My mind screamed at me to keep going, and I did. I vaulted the fence clumsily, scraping my shin, and hit the sidewalk running. I didn't stop until I was 3 blocks away, bent over, gasping like I'd run a marathon. My heart thudded so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. I slowed to a jog, then a walk, trying to convince myself I was safe. My ears rang in the silence. And then I heard it again, that same cat cry. Far away now, faint but clear, coming from the direction of the graveyard. I froze in the middle of the street, every muscle locking up. The sound stretched out, long and pitiful, then broke off. Another one followed, sharper this time. I forced myself to keep walking, faster now, almost tripping over the uneven sidewalk. My hands shook in my pockets, and I couldn't shake the image of that hooded man's mouth opening, of that awful noise spilling out. When I finally reached my street, I turned the corner so fast I nearly slammed into a trash can. My house was up ahead, porch light glowing weakly, like a beacon. I sprinted the last stretch and fumbled my keys, dropping them once before I managed to shove the door open. Inside, I slammed it shut, locked it, and pressed my back against it, trying to steady my breathing. The house was silent, safe, but even now, hours later, I can still hear it in my head, that sound, that man. And the sickening thought that whatever he was doing in that graveyard, he wasn't finished.